Welcome to the Science Corner, everyone. This is part of the deep dive, especially for you intellectually curious amateur scientists out there.
Glad to be here.
Today, we're getting into something really fascinating, the science of alchemy. We'll look at its history, some core ideas, and, well, how we view it now.
Right. The idea is really just to give a solid, introduction. It's a field that often gets misunderstood.
Exactly. I think most people hear alchemy and immediately picture sort of wizards trying to make gold out of lead, maybe a bit pseudoscientific.
That's the common image, yes. But when you actually look at the source material, the story is much, much richer. It really contributed quite a bit to how science itself developed.
Okay, good. So let's start with the name itself. Alchemy. Where does that actually come from? I found it interesting that it only entered English around the 14th century.
That's right. But the roots, like with many scientific terms, go way back. You trace it through Old French, alchemy, then medieval Latin, alchemia,
Okay.
and that takes us to Arabic, alchemia. Alchemia. So the al is the Arabic definite article, like
Precisely. And chemia itself likely comes from the late Greek chimea.
chimea. What did that mean?
Well, it could mean a couple of things, actually. Either the art of alloying metals, or maybe more broadly, chemical art. Both point to practical skills.
Alloying chemical art. Makes sense.
And there's even a theory, a pretty fascinating one, linking chimea to chem.
Chem, that's the ancient name for Egypt, right? Referring to the black soil.
Exactly. Which, if true, hints at these incredibly early links between transformation, the land itself, and what would become alchemy, a very deep root.
Wow. So the word itself tells a story. But what was alchemy, fundamentally? What were these alchemists actually trying to do?
Good question. Our sources suggest it was essentially a quest for material perfection achieved through a kind of creative process.
Creative, not just following recipes.
No, they saw it as a collaboration,
Yeah.
between human skill and nature itself. The goals varied, of course. Gold was definitely one.
The famous one. The most famous, yes. But also the elixir of life, for longevity or even achieving immortality. Some aimed for life itself.
And it wasn't just about the physical stuff, was it? There seems to be this strong spiritual or philosophical side, too.
Absolutely crucial. For many alchemists, perfecting matter, like turning lead to gold, was a kind of mirror. It mirrored the inner work of purifying the soul, seeking redemption or enlightenment. The outer and inner were linked.
Okay, that adds a whole different layer.
Yeah.
So we have the name, the basic goals.
Yeah.
Let's talk history. You mentioned Egypt.
Yeah.
How foundational was it?
Very. The connection to ancient Egypt seems really strong. It's all tied up with their mythology, their deep-seated reverence for immortality.
Like mummification.
Exactly. Mummification is a prime example. It demonstrates, pretty sophisticated early chemical preservation techniques.
Yeah.
They were actively trying to stop decay, to preserve.
A kind of transformation or prevention of it.
Right. And the whole idea of transformation was central to their beliefs, especially about the afterlife. Think about the Book of the Dead. It contains spells meant to let the deceased transform, change shape, become different beings. This focus on transformation and the desire for immortality. It really seems to have set the stage for alchemy.
So that ancient Egyptian soil, both literally and culturally, was fertile ground. What happened next? Where did these ideas go?
The next really critical phase was in Greco-Roman Egypt, specifically Alexandria.
Alexandria, the great melting pot.
Precisely. Between roughly the 1st and 7th century CE, the mix of Greek philosophy and Egyptian traditions seems to be where Western alchemy really got its start.
And what did that look like in practice? Was it still very mystical?
It started getting more practical, actually. We see the first actual alchemical writings emerge, and they often focus on, recipes.
Like cookery?
Sort of. The Stockholm and Leiden papyri, for instance, have instructions for dyeing fabrics, making artificial gems, even faking gold and silver. Very hands-on stuff.
Okay, so practical arts and crafts almost.
At first, yes. But then figures like Bolus of Mendes, sometimes called Pseudo-Democritus, started linking these recipes to bigger ideas. Astrology, the classical elements. Theory started to blend with practice.
And that's where Aristotle comes in.
Yeah.
Earth, air, fire, water.
Exactly. Aristotle's theory of the 4 elements, plus their qualities hot, cold, dry, humid, gave them a theoretical language. A framework to explain how one substance could potentially change into another. Transmutation.
Makes sense.
Zosimos of Panopolis is another big name from this Hellenistic period, writing extensively on these concepts.
So Egypt, then Greco-Roman Egypt, did it just stay there?
No, it continued in the Byzantine Empire. They did important work compiling and preserving texts and codices. But interestingly, similar ideas were bubbling up elsewhere, too.
Close.
India, for example, they had their own tradition called Rasayana.
Rasayana?
Yeah. It aimed for things like longevity, maybe transmutation too, but also had this concept of an alchemical body, something internal. Texts like the Arthashastra mention processes that sound alchemical, and figures like Nagarjuna are linked to it.
Fascinating. Parallel evolution, perhaps.
Could be. And then, of course, there's the Islamic world, hugely important.
Right. They preserve so much classical knowledge. How do they engage with alchemy?
They built directly on the Greek foundations and possibly absorbed some Indian ideas too. You get major figures like Jabir ibn Hayyan.
Known as Geber in the West.
That's the one. Also Al-Razi, Al-Kindi. These weren't just philosophers, they were experimenters.
Oh, what kind of experiments?
They really advanced laboratory practice, developed new equipment, started systematically cataloging substances. Razi left lists of apparatus things for melting, distilling.
Like what?
Well, alembics, the Arabic was alanbic flasks, special vessels called cucurbites or abul qara, different kinds of furnaces, al-tanur. Very practical.
And didn't some of our chemical words come from Arabic?
Absolutely. Alkali, alcohol, alembic itself, elixir. Even words like benzene have an indirect Arabic root. Their contribution to the language and practice of chemistry was immense.
A clear legacy there. What about further east? China.
Chinese alchemy developed somewhat differently. It was very closely tied to Taoism.
Taoism. So more spiritual.
Primarily, yes. The main goal was often finding elixirs of immortality, achieving spiritual transformation. They distinguished between Newton, internal alchemy, working with the body's energy,
Okay.
and Weidon, external alchemy, working with substances. And interestingly, gunpowder was an accidental discovery from Chinese alchemists searching for an elixir.
Wow. Talk about unexpected results. Okay, so we have these streams in Egypt, Greece, India, the Islamic world, China. How did they come together in Europe?
The big moment was the 12th century. That's when Arabic alchemical texts started being translated into Latin.
Oh, the translation movement.
Exactly. This flood of new or rediscovered knowledge really sparked interest across Europe. It's a major event for Western intellectual history.
Was it accepted easily? I imagine there might have been some tension with, say, the church.
There was some, sure. But you also had influential thinkers, theologians like St. Anselm and Peter Abelard, who were already working on reconciling faith with reason. That kind of paved the way.
Created an opening for it.
Right, and texts like Pseudo-Geber's Summa Perfectionians became hugely influential. It laid out practical operations, but also the sulfur-mercury theory.
Sulfur-mercury, what's that?
The idea that all metals were fundamentally composed of two principles: a philosophical sulfur, representing combustibility or soul, and a philosophical mercury, representing fusibility or spirit. Different metals just had different ratios, different purities.
Okay, another layer of theory.
Yes. And European alchemists also really leaned into the macrocosm-microcosm idea.
The universe reflecting the human.
Exactly. What happened in the cosmos, or in the flask, mirrored what could happen within the human soul. Purifying metals was like purifying the self. Big names like Roger Bacon and Albertus Magnus studied it. Sometimes it had royal patrons, sometimes it faced crackdowns. A complex picture.
It really sounds like it. How did this evolve as we get into the Renaissance and the early modern period? Did it start looking more like, well, chemistry?
The lines definitely started blurring. You had alchemists who were quite entrepreneurial, working for rulers and nobles on practical things, mining assays, making medicines, producing chemicals. Emperor Rudolf II in Prague had a whole court full of them.
The famous patron.
Very. And you find figures we now see as foundational to science deeply involved. John Dee, Michael Sendivogius. People even credit him with early work related to oxygen.
Really?
And Isaac Newton. He spent a huge amount of time on alchemy, decoding texts, experimenting, right alongside his work on gravity and optics.
Newton was an alchemist. That's not what we usually learn.
It's true. Robert Boyle, often called the father of chemistry, was also deeply engaged with it. Jan Baptist van Helmont, too. And ideas like elective attraction started emerging, basically, why some substances react and others don't. Precursors to chemical affinity tables.
So the seeds of modern chemistry were definitely there.
Absolutely. Paracelsus was another key figure pushing for alchemy in medicine iatrochemistry, though some of his followers got a bit carried away with toxic remedies.
Right. And this is also when we start hearing more about the stages of the great work, the magnum opus.
Yes, the descriptions become more common, the sequence of Negredo, the blackening.
Okay.
Then albedo, the whitening, citrinitas, yellowing, and finally rubedo, the reddening. These colors symbolize stages of purification and transformation, both in the material and potentially the spiritual sense.
Black, white, yellow, red, a symbolic path. So as science, particularly chemistry, became more formalized, what happened to alchemy? Did it just vanish?
Not quite. It's sort of split, diverged into two streams, you could say. One path continued the practical experimental side, the exoteric, which eventually fed directly into modern chemistry. The other path focused more on the symbolic, spiritual, psychological aspects, the esoteric. And that interpretation continued too. In fact, historians of science today, like Lawrence Principe and William Newman, are doing amazing work actually replicating alchemical experiments, decoding the texts.
Trying to figure out what they were really doing in the lab.
Exactly. While other scholars focus on interpreting the rich symbolic language from a philosophical or psychological perspective.
Which brings us neatly to the core concepts. We've mentioned a few, but let's quickly recap the big ideas. Transmutation is obviously key.
Central. The idea of changing one thing into another, especially lead into gold.
And the philosopher's stone.
The legendary substance, yes. The agent of transmutation, often also thought to grant immortality or perfect health, the ultimate goal for many.
Then the magnum opus we just discussed.
Right, the great work, that whole process, often with those color stages.
And underpinning it all were the four elements.
From Aristotle, yes. Earth, water, air, fire, and their qualities. That was the basic physics, if you like.
Plus the sulfur-mercury theory for metals.
Correct. Providing a rationale for how metals could be changed by altering the balance of these principles.
And we touched on the secrecy, the symbolic language. Why was that so prevalent?
Well, partly to protect their knowledge from rivals or from misuse, maybe from authorities, partly because they felt the work involved profound, sacred mysteries not meant for everyone. Using metaphors like the cold dragon for saltpeter kept things obscure.
A coded language.
Very much so, and always remember that spiritual dimension. For many, it wasn't just chemistry, it was a path to self-knowledge and transformation.
Okay, so a complex blend of practical work and deep symbolism. Now, how do we see alchemy today? What's its legacy? It didn't just end, as you said.
No, its influence is still felt. Most directly, of course, in chemistry. It's undeniable that alchemy was chemistry's precursor. Alchemists developed so much basic lab equipment, distillation apparatus, furnaces, glassware. They discovered and characterized many fundamental substances. Even figures like Boyle and Lavoisier, who established modern chemistry, were building on and reacting against centuries of alchemical practice and knowledge.
They couldn't have done their work without that foundation.
Exactly. Then there's psychology. Carl Jung found alchemy incredibly resonant.
Jung, how did he connect it?
He saw the symbols and processes of alchemy, the transformations, the stages, the goal of the stone or gold as powerful metaphors for psychological processes, specifically the process of individuation.
Individuation, becoming a whole, integrated self.
Precisely. For Jung, the alchemical magnum opus was like a map of the journey towards psychological wholeness. The symbols weren't just historical curiosities, they reflected deep archetypes of the human psyche.
That's a fascinating interpretation, taking it from the lab to the mind.
It is. And of course, alchemy's influence persists in literature, art, even popular culture. The whole idea of a transformative quest, overcoming obstacles to reach a higher state. It's a powerful narrative structure.
You see it everywhere once you look.
You really do.
Okay, so wrapping up our deep dive today, we've journeyed through alchemy's amazing history, from ancient Egypt, looked at its core ideas like transmutation and the stone, and seen how it echoes in modern chemistry, psychology, and culture.
Yes, and I think the key takeaway is that while, turning lead into actual gold isn't something modern science pursues in the same way, alchemy represents this incredibly rich history, a history of human curiosity, experimentation, and deep thinking about transformation, both material and spiritual. It wasn't just pseudoscience, it was proto-science, philosophy, and spiritual practice all rolled into one.
Which leaves us with a final thought, perhaps. Given this blend of hands-on experimentation and really profound symbolic thinking, what can alchemy teach us about how science happens? About that human drive to understand, to transform?
That's a great question to ponder. Maybe it shows that sometimes chasing what seems impossible, like the Philosopher's Stone, can lead you to discover incredibly valuable things along the way, even if they aren't what you initially set out to find.
Unexpected discoveries born from ambitious goals.
Exactly. So we definitely encourage listeners to explore further, read some of the translated texts, look into the modern interpretations. There are definitely more aha moments waiting in this field. It's surprisingly relevant.